Good afternoon. I don't know what day it is anymore in these jobs. Do you guys know what day it is? I think it's Wednesday. We're getting there. Welcome to Concordia. I want to thank Matt Swift for having us. Can we have a round of applause for him? It's always amazing what Matt puts on every year. And of course, thank you to everybody who's on the live stream. I am a very, very lucky lady in that I've spent the last 2 months, or 9 months, working with these two gentlemen. There's so much that we want to discuss on foreign policy, but first, I have to go to both of you. I'll start with Steve. What's incredibly interesting about the Trump administration is that obviously we all know that President Trump is unconventional. He's looking at things from a business perspective. But for the world's hottest wars, the toughest diplomatic challenges, he chose the two of you, two of his best friends for 40 years, to solve these problems. So I think that there's so much about the president that we all know since he's been in the limelight his whole life. But what do you know, Steve, and then Tom, about President Trump that makes your job different, that makes you able to get to deals on these incredibly hard challenges around the world?
Well, Morgan, what I know about him, and I know him for a long time, is that he's a lot more relentless than I ever thought he was.
Wow.
That's what I know.
Any stories, any behind the scenes things that you haven't shared yet?
Oh my gosh, so many, so many. But we were laughing, me and Tom, with you before, and what we were saying is that he is intent on being successful every minute of the day. And, you know, if I made a joke, if Tom called him up on the phone and settled something, and he was enthusiastic about that. 2 minutes later, he'd probably get on the phone with Tom and say, "What have you done for me in the last 2 minutes?" So he's quite a leader.
He drives himself, and then I think he drives all of us in the same way. You know, Tom, you've done business deals with him. You've been friends with him for decades. What about him makes you able to do your job, makes it a challenge? What's something that we don't all understand about President Trump?
His instincts are foolproof. I think Steve and I would agree because, you know, I applied to be the ambassador to St. Bart's. Steve applied to Maldives. I don't know what happened. How we got this area code is unbelievable, and we're both recovering lawyers. So, you know, our attitude with him for 40 years has always been, he has the vision. He's always had the vision, and you feel in the substance. I think what we both found is his instincts are beyond belief. So if you take both of us and you sit in a room, and he's got to make a difficult decision on anything, rockets, missiles, war, unilateral trade constraints. He gets 6 of the smartest people in the room. He listens to everybody's point of view. And it's like a cappuccino. So he's listening to the people say, well, espresso is the most important thing in the cappuccino. No, water is the most important thing. No, the cups are the most important thing. No, actually cleaning the machine is the most important thing. No, the milk is the most important thing. And he looks and says, you know, I like Steve. Milk is the most important thing. 99% of the time, we've been discussing, his instincts this time around are amazingly good and against all odds.
Yeah. You know, that's a great way of describing it. Steve, right after the election, and you and I had worked together in the think tank that I had founded, you've been a friend and supporter. I told people after the election, I was in Navy expeditionary combat training. So I was literally laying prone in the woods in Mississippi, shooting an M4. And I told everybody, listen, I have a small kid. There's 2 things I'm not going to do. I'm not going to go to Washington, and I'm definitely not going into the White House. Steve called me about a week after the election and said, how about coming to Washington and helping me in the White House? I had to jump at the opportunity. One of the things that I learned about Steve that I didn't know is how big his heart is for the hostages and for people suffering in Gaza. He was the first White House official, administration official in almost 20 years to go into Gaza. And I can tell you, having sat with him for 6 months in the White House, there's not a day that went by that a hostage family didn't call him. Someone would come to see them. He would take them in the Oval Office. Your heart is so big, especially having lost your own son. I know how much you put your heart and your emotion into trying to solve a conflict that has gone on for a very, very long time, even before this war started. I think what everybody wants to know is, you know, President Trump took a very decisive stance on this war. He had the meeting yesterday. I'm sure you can't divulge too many details, but given that he's entrusted you and helping him bring this war to an end, can you give us a little bit of insight into how the meeting went yesterday?
Yeah, so the meeting was great yesterday, but I just more want to say this. He's the president. I have what seems to be a big job, a frenzied job. Tom, he's all over the Middle East. He has so much to do. But whatever we have to do, it's small in comparison to the job that President Trump has to do. He's never once refused a hostage visit.
That's
right, from a hostage family. So that's my job to take those visits. And I get a lot out of it because I relate to them because I'm a member of a bad club. I've lost a child, and many of these people have lost children and maybe even expect to lose children. But the president has never refused those meetings. You walk down to the Oval, you tell him that there's a hostage family here, and he wants to come in and embrace them, and he spends real time with them. But as to your specific question, we met with the leaders of many of the Middle Eastern nations yesterday, including where Tom is the ambassador. We met with President Erdogan. It was my honor to meet him. I had never met him before, and I told him that. Really, it was, and we had a very productive session. We presented what we call the Trump 21-point plan for peace in the Mideast in Gaza. I think it addresses Israeli concerns and as well the concerns of all the neighbors in the region, and we're hopeful and I might say even confident that in the coming days we'll be able to announce some sort of breakthrough.
Amazing. Well, that doesn't surprise me. You know, the next biggest challenge in the Middle East, Tom, after you look at the Gaza war is, of course, what you're dealing with in Syria. You were confirmed, I think, in May to be ambassador to Turkey, and it was only a few weeks later that the president asked you to take on this challenge. And here you have a country that's been in civil war for 15 years. You have so many minority groups that have been at war. There's U.S. Forces there. We've been fighting ISIS. The president had to destroy the physical caliphate of in Iraq and Syria of ISIS in his first term. And here we are dealing with the challenge again. You know, you get these questions a lot about what do you think about al-Shara? Where is the government going? What I'm really curious about is, what is President Trump's expectation for Syria? What has he told you as this is what is a win for me and my administration?
Yeah, look, I think, and Steve and I agree 100%. I mean, what President Trump did with Steve was not diplomacy. It was event-driven surgery. And by bypassing the machinery and the process, which is very good, right? The people inside all of these bureaucracies are solid, but the system is slow. So he took a trusted surgeon that had a scalpel and says, I'm going to put you in the toughest job. Henry Kissinger spent a decade trying to do the same thing that Steve really got done because he had a relationship with the president and listened to him, but he knew how to execute that vision. It's the same thing here. All the president did on May 10th, standing side by side with Mohammed bin Salman, made a determination based on 5 minutes with an individual. He had had all of the information from all of us before about, can you trust someone who is a jihadist, who is in guerrilla fatigues, who's now standing in front of you in a Tom Ford suit? The president said, well, what happened to Nelson Mandela? Wasn't he a foreign terrorist for 27 years? What happened in Israel 2 times with the same problems with Menachem Begin? And he made the determination on the spot, said, look, I'm going to give you a chance because I'm going to lift sanctions. That was our entire investment. That's the president's entire investment. He looked at lessons learned, which Steve started from the beginning of saying, what have we done in Israel that's worked? What have we done in Israel that hasn't worked? What's happened with the Palestinians since 1948? Nothing has worked. He found the first crevice to be able to do that. The same with the president, just saying, I'm going to give it a chance. It's the region's problem. It's not America's problem. No more boots on the ground. No more regime change. We didn't make the regime change. The President Trump did not make the regime change from Assad. So he said, I'm going to give it a chance. You regional partners come in. You guys get it together. We'll usher it. We'll console it. We've got his greatest ally and Steve trying to, the 10,000-pound gorilla everywhere is Gaza. We're dealing with moderate and sometimes not moderate Islamic countries who find this difficult to understand. So it's hand in glove. Now we have a peace plan, but the peace plan is not to overcommit America like we've done before. So Since the Second World War, we've had in just our portfolio, we've had 17 regime changes, ceasefires. None of them have worked. So what we're left with is Iraq, Libya, Iran, Egypt. Sinai Agreement kind of worked, right? Nobody has had this mentality of President Trump and saying, let them solve their own problems. We're going to allow them to do it. I need scalpels, so I need somebody like Steve, who's a surgeon who can go in and fix something, and then I need a large backbone, and the backbone doesn't move, right? The backbone is solid, it's there, it's durable, but it's immovable, and that's the system. So I think we're all privileged to be able to be in a moment, and that moment is saying, do it now, get it done, and don't put up with any of the garbage around you. Lessons learned.
You know, Steve, Tom just brought up Iran, which is another huge, incredible, generational challenge. Obviously, we know that you were in intense negotiations with the foreign minister, with the Iranians, and then the 12-day war happened. Of course, last week, in my purview here at the UN, the United States worked with E3, the United Kingdom, France, Germany, and snapback sanctions were actually placed on Iran. That was initiated in the Security Council last Friday. So, Steve, where are we now on Iran? Is there a diplomatic path forward?
Well, we're talking to them. By the way, Tom and I work on these things together. We used to work in the real estate business together. And actually, I tell you just anecdotally, a small story. We're walking yesterday, and I'm with the president. We're going into this meeting, and he said to me, what would you be doing if you were today not doing this and you were doing a real estate deal? I don't care how big it is. Would that be meaningful to you? I said to him, Mr. President, this is the only thing that's meaningful to me, because he's always chiding us, and I'm sure Tom's got similar stories like that. I confer with Tom all the time, Morgan. We talk, I don't know, 15 times a week. I mean, it's literally like that. We're sending messages to each other because everything he works on, he's in Lebanon and Syria today and Turkey. And by the way, Turkey influences Azerbaijan, which I worked on. And so we are totally connected and correlated. And I think it's part of the secret of the Trump administration, and it's why we get attacked so much, because I think his administration, because of his policy prescriptions and the way he oversees it, has been successful. And so I think people are envious of that, particularly people who have not been as successful and been in the office before that. With regard to Iran, we're talking to them. And why wouldn't we? We talk to everybody as well we should. That's the job. Our job is to solve things diplomatically. And I think you listen to Tom, I mean, he's got just a perfect grasp of the region. You would think he was, he was a professor, at the Georgetown School of Foreign Policy, the way he talks about it. He's just got a wonderful grasp of the region. But I would say with Iran that they're in a tough position now. Snapbacks are going to ensue in, 2 days or 3 days, something like that?
27th, I think.
And I think that we have no desire to hurt them. I think we have a desire, however, to either realize a permanent solution and negotiate around snapbacks, and if we can't, then snapbacks will be what they are. They're the right medicine for what's happening.
Well, it's certainly something that people have grappled with for a long time. President Trump, the first 2 weeks, I think, of the administration, did the max pressure campaign against Iran. And so hopefully with that and snapback that you can get, Steve, a path forward. It'll be a long few months for sure in this file.
But I do want to make one point, and this is not false modesty. Tom will say the same thing. We are really emissaries of President Trump. It's not us. I think what makes the job easier is his indomitable spirit, his force of personality. It's what drives every negotiation out there. He's the greatest body puncher in the world, and then guys like me and Tom come in, and all we have to do is close our eyes, throw the right hook, and if we connect, then it's going to be successful. But that really is the case with him. They respect him strongly out there, and so that gives us an edge.
Tom, if Syria wasn't enough, 15 years of civil war, you also have your ambassador to one of the most important countries, not only the region, but in the world, Turkey, a NATO ally. And like any country in the Middle East, any country that you could go to in the Middle East, that is a friend or an ally of the United States, there's challenges, but then there's a ton of things that detract from the relationship. And Turkey sometimes has a fraught relationship with Congress. What do you think is misunderstood about the Turkish and American relationship? What are people not seeing on the positive side, what you're doing behind the scenes with them?
Yeah, you're so good. Everything is misunderstood. We can start from there. But, and I think Steve and I agree 100%. We have a short period of time. So our privilege with the president is we don't have career. Steve is doing this on his own nickel. He doesn't need to do anything. He can be in his palatial home in Miami or anywhere in the world at choice, and he puts up with all of the abuse from all of the determinants who are trying to interfere with what this president is trying to get done. Turkey is another example of exactly that. So everybody says, well, it's a great NATO ally. It's the second largest NATO ally. All of that is true. We've been dealing with the same issues for 10 years. So if you go, Steve, talking, by the way, he loved you. He thought you were great, but he loved your tie.
Erdogan?
Yeah. He makes his own ties. So I told him that I would take your tie and send it to him. It'll be part of the peace deal. But the same issues for 10 years have been going on. S-400s, F-35s, F-16s, Hall Bank, this confusion. Are they friends? Are they foe? Well, they're dealing with Russia. They're conservative Muslims, they're aggressive Muslims, they haven't condemned the Muslim Brotherhood, they haven't condemned Hamas, the same confusing issues. So what happens is our president says, you know what? I'm tired of all of this. Let's take a bold move and on a relationship to relationship base, give them what they need. So yes, Mr. President, what is that? He says legitimacy, right? I never forget, he's so smart. Because it's not about lines, it's not about the S-400, it's not about the F-16s, it's about legitimacy. You have a country that's been our greatest ally in NATO, NATO being Europe, and Europe won't let him into the European Union. He's our greatest ally. It's the largest buyer of F-16s in the world, right? Which keeps Lockheed moving. Yet we're thwarting him and giving him F-35s. So it's not about, he's at a point, he's 71 years old, it's a democracy, but it's kind of authoritarian. And President Trump was genius in saying, the solution is, I need to give him legitimacy. And that's what's happening. And I think you're going to see a dramatic change as a result of, again, that instinctive node that we live with every day. I never thought of it in terms of just legitimacy.
Steve, before actually President Trump was sworn in, and you were incredibly busy because you were chairing the inaugural and working there, you actually started working closely with Brett and Amos and the whole Biden administration on some of these big challenges in the Middle East. And I know you and I were on the phone with them weeks before the president was even inaugurated. You famously went there and was able to secure the first ceasefire before the president was inaugurated. But this panel is about America's role in the world. Knowing the president as you do, and you're the special envoy for peace missions, so you're not only doing the Middle East, Russia, Ukraine, anywhere in the world where there's a hot spot, the president likes to send you in. What do you think is the major difference in how President Trump is conducting his foreign policy from the previous administration? What's our role in the world now? What does that mean to you?
Well, I think his success is about communication and access. We have people like Tom and I have access directly to the president, and that goes to Keith Kellogg. It goes to other envoys out there, Mossad Boulos. If there's a problem, the president makes himself available, and he encourages communication between envoys, ambassadors. The Secretary of State is extraordinary in that regard. He's a great communicator. Vice President is not an ordinary vice president. He's a real deal diplomat, and he's incredibly bright. But let me give you a small example to you, Morgan, and to the audience. So Tom in Turkey has two people that are very, very important to everything that happens in that region. One is a gentleman by the name of Ibrahim, who's the intelligence director there, and another gentleman, Hakan, who is their foreign minister. And I might end up with a problem in Azerbaijan or Armenia, could be a Ukrainian issue. And these gentlemen I'm referring to in Turkey are experts in all of these areas. And I'm encouraged in the Trump administration, this is how he works, to call Tom on the phone and to say to Tom, what's Ibrahim's insight as to this? And this is how we work together. There are countless examples of successes that we're having because we're communicating so well as an administration. The president, if he's got people working for him, he gives them a lot of rope, and he lets them do their thing. And it's important to. We're speaking for him. He is the elected person, and he's got a policy prescription. But it's about us going out there and executing on that policy. And we are just really working well as an administration. I remember on the first hostage release you're talking about that we worked on with Brett, where the Biden administration allowed us in. I remember saying to Brett, because he's a very bright guy, I remember saying to him, you just never had the authority to operate the way we have. I mean, you know, if Tom sees, he's not an ordinary ambassador. I mean, he's out there fixing 2 other countries on top of the official ambassadorship. And why? Because he's effective, and because he's got a very, very good insight of how connected Syria and Lebanon is, not just to Israel, but to Gaza, to the proxies, to the enrichment issue in Iran, and to Azerbaijan and Armenia and Russia for that matter. So I think you really need competent people, and the president has this uncanny ability of finding people like Tom, and that's why we're so effective.
You know, speaking of finding effective people, Tom, you and I have the amazing opportunity to work so closely with Secretary Rubio. I've actually known him the longest out of anyone in Washington. I met him in college when he was a state rep in Florida. We've got the Florida Mafia now, Steve and all of us in the White House. And for me, you know, Tom and I talk on a daily basis. Steve and I talk every other day. It's really an amazing honor for me to work with the both of you. And when Tom and I are talking, I will often say, you know, Secretary Rubio said X, Y, Z. I thought, you know, wasn't sure. He was totally right every time. And I had the privilege in the last administration of working at the State Department for President Trump. But I've been so impressed with how Secretary Rubio has been able to guide what you and I are doing and to take every situation around the world and, similar to President Trump, have the right gut. So I'm just wondering if you could actually expand to the audience a little bit on what it's like to work with Secretary Rubio and the dynamics for somebody who's not only Secretary of State, but also National Security Advisor.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, both Steve and I love working with you because all the press, all the cameras want to be on you as you get your hair blown out. So that's a problem that I don't have. Steve has less. But you've been amazing, and we're both so thankful to have you. Look, here's the bottom line. If you think of Secretary Rubio going from a political opponent of the president, and everybody was hesitant at the beginning. Is he capable? 100%. Is he competent? Beyond. Does he have experience? Foreign relations, intelligence was his fabric. But can he be loyal and dedicated to this president when they came from different places? I'm telling you, as a user of his product, the man is the most competent, most energetic, most balanced, most instinctive executor of the president's vision across a really complicated, I mean, Steve and I have zip codes. He has the world. And besides that, he has these unbelievably difficult organizations. The people in the Foreign Service are first class, they're pedigreed, they're legendary, they came from great schools, they're educated. The system is not bred to get anything done. It's bred to avoid anything getting done. So that's what you start with. Secretary Rubio came in with the same kind of focus and brilliantly looked and said, you know, we have this national security platform also, which has only been together one time in history, which was Henry Kissinger. And again, President Trump, now believing in Secretary Rubio, which was the other part of this, giving him the confidence and the faith in the performance, collapsed those two entities. And I think we're the beneficiaries of that single focus foreign policy. President Trump has the vision, Secretary Rubio executes across the board, and he's relentless. He never sleeps, he never gets tired. his thought process and his decisions in really critical times, his balance, his focus. We have the greatest respect for him. We're so lucky to have him.
Well, speaking of being relentless, I know that the two of you said yes quickly because you knew I would be relentless to have you both here. So thank you so much for having this time at the Concordia conference. And thank you, Matt Swift, and thanks to our audience.
Thank you.
Thank you.